Hello class. Today I'm going to be presenting my video researcher project question, which is, how does the promotion of peace in the international system affect how states and civilians rationally make important decisions? Now, when we're talking about peace, we have to understand that there's different concepts of peace. Everyone, every religion, and every nationality sees peace as different. So, Western views of peace were influenced by the New Testament and Greek meanings. So there's four basic principles that a lot of people can agree with when it comes to peace. The first one is conflict, which is a mutual adjusting of what people want, what people can get, and what people are willing to pursue. So whether this be hostile actions, violence, war, it's basically the same concept. There's a means and there's a manifestation. Cooperation is simple. It depends on the expectations aligned with the power. If there's a definite equilibrium among the parties' interests, capabilities, and wills, then there's going to be cooperation. The gap principle is also simple. It's where expectations and power cause conflict. So interests between states can shift, capabilities can develop between governments, and wills with citizens can also strengthen or even weaken. And lastly, the helix principle, which is conflict that becomes less intense, and now cooperation is much more lasting. Now, you'll see in the slide that there is a conceptual levels and dimensions of peace. And basically on the left-hand side, the conceptual levels of war, violence, nonviolence are all targeted towards specific social levels. Now, you'll see the war is more global and the nonviolent conflict is more individual. It's more personal and it's more civil. Now, like I said before, there are many interpretations of peace, whether it be culturally, religious, there's all different types. And the last principle, the helix principle, which is when conflict becomes less intense and cooperation is more lasting. Now, like I said before, the most popular view of peace, or the Western view, is the complete absence of violence or war, which is also found in the New Testament and has an original meaning from the Greek word for peace, which is eirene. So as you can see in this table, there's the conceptual levels and then the dimensions of peace. So as you can see, war is a social, a global issue that everyone feels the faults of. Violence is more of a state issue between states. The nonviolent conflict is usually groups, so drug cartels, other, drug trafficking organizations, human trafficking organizations, criminal organizations that are up to no good. And then the nonviolent conflict is an individual. It's the civilian who feels like they're deprived of their rights and want to riot and they want to revolt. This chart is also very interesting because they go into the actual dimensions of peace. Peace is not one solid, flat definition, like I said, that we can all interpret. It's something that everyone sees as completely different. There's an empirical type of peace, an abstract type of peace, there's a constructual version, and there's a normative version. So all of these levels and dimensions of peace help us understand how we can achieve that and how people can use that to make the most rational, clear-minded decisions in the international system. Now, there's the cultural and religious practices of peace, which vary from region to region. Now, the first one, religious practices. We can all assume that religion influences how we all see peace. Now, for example, Hindu and Islamic religions like the Quran, different religious texts that come out from these specific religions have different interpretations and perceptions of peace. Now, peace may be a dichotomy if it exists or not. It could be continuous, it could be passive or active, empirical or abstract, descriptive or normative, or even positive or negative. There are negative versions of peace that a lot of people don't look at. Now, pacifists have adopted this interpretation for peace, and to them, all violence is bad. Now, in some religions and some cultures, some violence may be bad and others may not be as harmful if needed. The second one, the recognition of mental health. If you respect your citizens enough to ensure them medical attention, rights for a more healthy lifestyle, more days off, less stressful workplaces, they will have less need to riot and revolt because they're getting their deserved and needed rights. When you start to deprive people of their rights, they revolt for their own interests and their own survival. So these concepts include mental health cleanliness sessions like yoga, meditation, and other peaceful practices that you can easily utilize to help you in your day-to-day life. The third, the fourth, and the fifth concept that I listed in my PowerPoint all go hand in hand. The rights for new parents, such as maternal leave, more social programs and initiatives to allow new parents, especially the expecting woman, to feel more appreciated. Also, promotion of physical and spiritual health. Like I said, meditation and yoga may be cultural peace practices, but you can easily do them in your day-to-day life. You can refer back to Gandhi or Indian culture, where peaceful worship is heavily promoted in these Asian nations. It allows for the population to be stable. So, like I said, the Global Peace Index came out with the report of the states that are considered the most peaceful ranked in 2017. Now, you can see Iceland ranking at the top, New Zealand is right under, and then Portugal. Now, I just decided to put the US, Russia, and Iran because those are countries that we all talk about constantly in this course. Now, these more industrialized nations where they have more conflict use the working class ideology, which is where you create more tension between the bourgeoisie and the proletariats and allow for the breeding of tension and turmoil within the population. It's similar to the last slide, which conceptualizes peace and its after effects on the working labor force. All right, so I found this Vision of Humanity chart released in 2016 to 2017 very interesting. This basically details how the conflict of the world has changed from year to year. So you'll see that internal conflicts that have been fought have dropped, terrorism impacts have dropped, and also you can see right here, United Nations peacekeeping has dropped. The funds for this program has dropped, and you can see because of this decrease of funding, weapon importation, violent crimes, homicide rates, political terror, and external conflict fought have increased exponentially because of the drop of funding with the UN. Now, if you're not going to fund these kind of worldly international programs to help promote peace, then conflicts will rise because citizens worldwide are experiencing the deprivation of human, civil, and rights in general. They're unalienable and they deserve them. And if they aren't receiving what they need, they're going to revolt and riot against the sovereign body. So when we're talking about the international level of peace, now we're going to discuss the after effects of maintaining or at least trying to integrate a peaceful state. Now, when you think of states like Afghanistan, Iran, Syria, Ukraine, Mexico, states that are considered failed, fragile, or even dangerous simply, these states that establish a more peaceful measure in their international governmental body will help them gain recognition in the international or global arena. They'll gain rehabilitation, and other hegemons will see them trying to maintain a more peaceful, mentality, and they will see that as something good and something democratic and something that they want to promote. Now, whether it be economic, social, political, all of these will help aid the stance in the international system. Now, when politicians have a clear mind on what their civilians want, they're more likely to make more rational and more thoughtful decisions. When they have pressure because their civilians are rioting and revolting, they tend to make decisions that are not quite needed for the populace just because of the amount of pressure that they're under. So, with the assistance of peaceful practices, lawmakers, politicians, diplomats can now rationally and clear-mindedly lead their state into prosperity. Now, this slide I find so important and relevant for the peacemaking of states throughout the world. Now, financial security is one of the biggest contemporary issues that we are now facing. The financial security of civilians can affect how the state runs its financial institutions and monetary agencies. If citizens are able to acquire and manage their own wages, they can then spend more and infiltrate their funds back entirely into the economic system. Now, not only does having financial security lead to citizens feeling more confident, more safe, and more secure, it also allows for the infiltration of more funds into the state's economic system, which allows for more production, more industrialization, and more prosperity. Now, I want to elaborate on the last point, which is the global economic peace system, better known as peace economics. Now, peace economics focuses on the design of the socio-theoretical, political, economical, and cultural institutions and their interacting policies and actions with the goal of preventing, mitigating, or resolving violent contexts and conflict within and between societies. This violent conflict could be of any type and can involve either latent or actual violence. Presuming knowledge of the cost of violence, it focuses on the benefits of reconstructing societies with a view towards achieving irreversible, stable peace forever. Alrighty, so now we're going to be discussing the international organizations that mainly promote peace in the international system. Now, you have to understand that many of these organizations listed have come about after the Second World War, where the world was in turmoil and simply confused. It was around 1945 when this happened. Like I said before in the beginning, each organization utilizes different methods of approach in order to achieve their own interests in establishing world peace. Now, each organization, like I said, has different definitions of peace and stability, and each promote their own interpretation of global stability. Like these organizations, the UN is one of the most prominent ones. It does this by working to prevent conflict entirely, by helping parties in conflict make peace, by peacekeeping, and by creating the conditions to allow peace to hold, and most importantly, to flourish. These activities usually overlap on one another to be the most effective. Now, as you can see, there's the Human Rights Watch, the Religions Initiative, the International Crisis Group. All of these are specifically catered to either religious, social, cultural, or political initiatives to promote peace. So now we're going to discuss the global peacemakers and their ideologies. So the first one, Martin Luther King. While others were advocating for freedom by any means necessary, including harsh violence, MLK used the power of words and acts of nonviolent resistance, like protests, grassroots organizations, and civil disobedience, to achieve the seemingly impossible goals he had. Okay, so now we're going to discuss the ideologies of Chavez, Cesar Chavez to be exact. He was a Mexican farmer who noticed the exploitation by their employers. They were unpaid, they had to live in shacks, and they had no voice. So he decided through marches, strikes, and boycotts to force these employers to pay these decent wages and provide benefits. And so he was the one that enacted actually the first bill for agricultural rights in Mexico. Now, lastly, we're going to talk about the ideologies of both Gandhi and Roosevelt. So, Gandhi is associated with the contributions of nonviolent resistance, also known as civil resistance. There are two pillars to his concepts, which are truth and nonviolence. Now, Eleanor Roosevelt is quite common because she's an American. She comes from our own nation, and she was the chair of the UN Human Rights Commission, and she was the driving force in creating the 1948 Charter of Liberties. And this will be something she's always remembered by, which is called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which lays out what every single human on earth deserves and needs. Now, I would thank you guys for watching my PowerPoint presentation, and I really hope that you guys have a better understanding of the true definition of peace, the fact that it's a contemporary international issue, and how we can resolve it and make it easier for states to achieve.